Welcome to Story Connections, where we discuss books and all the wonderful, exciting, frightening, and fascinating tales they present, and how all these things pertain to our lives. Now, here are your hosts, Kathryn Townsend and Rebecca Guthrie.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Guthrie.
And I'm Kathryn Townsend.
And this is Story Connections. If you want to connect with us online, you can visit us at whystoriesmatter.com or facebook.com/whystoriesmatter. And we'd love to have you tell us what you're reading this week or just stop by and say hi. So today, I'm super excited because we're going to be talking about mysteries, and we have a special guest with us. Christine Burke is the owners of Clues Unlimited, which is an independent mystery bookstore that's located on Fort Lowell and Country Club, and she's here to talk with us this segment about her bookstore and mysteries and why she loves them and all that stuff. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. We're thrilled to have you. So the first question, I guess, would be, why did you decide to open an independent mystery bookstore?
Well, actually, I was a customer at the first incarnation of this bookstore, which was Footprints of a Gigantic Hound. And when I heard that and I was working as a stockbroker at that time, and I heard that the owners were thinking about retiring, and I thought, this would be such fun. For one thing, I'd get to read books and I wouldn't have to buy them.
I can understand that one.
So I and two other women decided to go ahead and we bought the store in 1996.
So were you a mystery reader when you purchased it, or did you become a mystery reader after you purchased it?
No, I was definitely a mystery reader and definitely a good customer of theirs.
So why do you like mysteries? Why is that a thing that you gravitate towards?
I think that mysteries have a number of things going for them. One is that they tend to have a strong narrative, and they grab your attention. You've got this puzzle that needs to be solved. More than that, and this, I don't want people to think I'm putting too much on mystery as a genre, but mystery really offers us a moral perspective that a lot of other kinds of books don't. Every time you have a crime, what you have is a tearing of the social fabric. The mystery presents us with this tear, and then the detective has to find out what happened, who did it, why it was done, and that in a way knits back the fabric so that things come together again. There's nothing, when you think about it, what's more awful than murder? Not much.
Yes, no.
Exactly. And, if you look at something like, John Donne, the Anglican priest in the 16th century, in one of his sermons, says, each man's death diminishes me. And that's what happens, because we're all connected.
So do you think people like mysteries because even if they haven't analyzed it to the extent that you're talking about, on some level they understand that what they're looking at is a mini repair of the fabric of society?
Yes, and they're also, the other thing that I think is really important is that in mysteries there's justice.
Yes, there is.
And so it's a little of life. Do you actually see justice done? Reading mysteries is...
I think that's a really interesting point, because one of the things that we were talking about last week when we were talking about young adult novels is that a lot of young adult novelists have started breaking the contract between reader and author, and there isn't a resolution at the end of the book. But I can't think of any mysteries where there isn't a resolution, where the crime doesn't get solved or where justice isn't done. Are there mysteries that do that?
I can't really think of anything because most of the time, yes, justice is done. There is a resolution, and the justice may not be, somebody being hauled off to jail. Justice may mean something else, something other than that. But there is justice done, and we do know the whys of the crime. We know the hows of the crime, and that's very satisfactory too.
Right, the need to understand.
Well, I think that you could see that playing out with the missing Malaysia airline plane, and everybody going, "Where did it go? Where did it go? What happened?" And people became obsessed with what happened to this plane. They're conspiracy theories that make sense, and there are wacko conspiracy theories. But everybody, it feels like there's no resolution. We haven't found the plane. We don't know what happened, and it bothers people.
And yeah, at this point, I think everybody would be so happy to have a resolution that they don't even care really what it is, just to know.
Right.
And
that's what mysteries do. They let you know.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sold that mystery is an important genre.
No, and I'm glad you're sold, because there are people who say, "Oh my gosh, I would never read mysteries. I only read literary fiction."
Well, I have to admit that I do read mysteries, but I read cozies. I can't stand suspense. I just can't. So why don't you talk about the different kinds of mysteries that there are?
There are so many different kinds. It's wonderful, and in fact, there's whatever you do, there's a mystery that has to do with it. Cozies are mysteries that have minimal violence, minimal. They're usually funny. There's an amateur sleuth, and they often have a cat. There's a cat involved.
Really? That's true. I hadn't thought about that. That's true.
Now, police procedurals that's where you actually get into how police take care. How do they handle a crime? What sort of procedures they use? CSI would be a good example of a police procedural on TV. Private Eye is that's one of the oldest genres, and that's sort of the lone man, the kind of knight going out to
Sherlock Holmes would be a good example of that.
Yeah, to find the truth, to find justice, and now the Private Eye often has a dog.
Okay. What about Kinky Friedman?
And then there's Kinky Friedman.
He's got the cat, so that would be a cozy, wouldn't it?
You know, actually, I put him in cozy because there's really not a lot of violence.
Right.
And for our listeners at home, the voice that you just heard is Harry. He's our engineer, and he's wonderful. But we wanted to let I've had people ask me, who is that? So
and I like to read, too.
Yes, he does.
So who is Kinky Friedman?
Kinky Friedman was in a rock band in the 60s. Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys. And then when that broke up, he started writing a mystery series. And then after he stopped doing that, he ran for governor of Texas.
And now he's running for the State Agriculture Commission in Texas.
Okay, there you go.
The basis of the story is he lives in a flat in Greenwich Village and has a group of close folks with him who help him solve crimes. There was one book, and I honestly can't remember the title of it, where he and Willie Nelson went out on Willie's bus, and they traversed through Arizona. And, I mean, hilarious stuff.
Oh, he's so funny. Yeah. He's also very involved with animal rescue.
Yes, he has an animal rescue ranch in Texas.
Okay, so there you go. You can read books with Willie Nelson on a tour bus, which I can only imagine would be funny.
Through Arizona.
There's a local connection.
How much better does it get than that?
I don't know.
It doesn't.
So, do you have a favorite mystery author?
Actually, I was thinking about it on the way over. Everybody always says who's my favorite, and part of that depends on what my mood is at the moment. But there are three people I'd like to mention that I think are just outstanding. One is Jacqueline Winspear, who writes a series with a woman named Maisie Dobbs.
I love those books.
Aren't they wonderful?
They're very fun.
These are set right after the First World War. Maisie is a private investigator, and they are so wonderful. And they touch on really important social issues, but in a way that
isn't preachy.
Not preachy at all.
And you don't feel like you're reading history, but you are.
But you're learning about things like the national strike in the 20s. Well, you're learning about it.
Not just that, but things that you might not necessarily think about in terms of what it was like to be a soldier coming back and trying to reintegrate when so many people died and so many of the survivors are wounded in ways that nobody can see.
Right. Oh yeah, and in fact, the book that she has, the new book that she has, is straight historical fiction about the Great War.
Okay.
But she is coming back to Maisie. So we don't need to worry about that.
Okay. So that's one.
The other person I really enjoy is Louise Penny. She's a Canadian writer who sets her series in a village outside of Montreal called Three Pines, and it's a village you just want to move to. Everybody seems interesting and fun. The descriptions of food just make you hungry. It's great. And she has not only the population of this little town that stays, people come and go, but there are certain characters who reappear, but also a police inspector who comes to solve the crimes, Inspector Gamache. And so we get to know his family, what's going on with them. For a while it looked like his daughter might be becoming involved with his detective sergeant, and we had to worry about that.
So we've got about a minute and a half left in this segment. So really quickly, who's the third one?
The third one is Craig Johnson. He writes a series set in Wyoming, wonderful, funny, featuring a sheriff in a small area of Wyoming. It's almost a local connection. Great read.
Well, very cool. So do you have any book clubs or anything like that, book signings, authors coming into town in the next couple of weeks that we can promote?
Well, we have a book club on the second Sunday of June, and we're reading an Elmore Leonard book, Riding the Rap.
Okay.
Then we also have a signing coming up with Jenny Milchman, who's coming to sign her second book, Becky Masterman, Lala Corriere, and I think one other person, but I'm not sure.
And will all that information be up on your website?
That will be on my website. And then, as the frosting on the cake, so to speak, we have Books, Crooks, and Cupcakes coming up.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
What is Books, Crooks, and Cupcakes?
Kate Carlisle and Jen McKinley will be here talking about their books. And they're both cozies. They're both cozy writers. And Jen has a series with Cupcakes. So I thought, oh, no way we're going to let this go by without something
Thank
yummy.
you so much for swinging by and visiting with us and talking to us. We really appreciate it. And again, we've been speaking with Christine Burke from Clues Unlimited. She's the owner, and you should definitely swing by and say hi.
And real quick, what's your website?
CluesUnlimited.com.
Okay.
We'll see you on the other side.
Bye-bye.
Promoting free enterprise and independent thinking. This is Tucson's intelligent talk station, 1030 KVOI, The Voice. Intelligent weekend talk that's live and local, only on AM 1030 KVOI, The Voice. Call in now, 790-2040. That's 790-2040.
Hi, welcome back to Story Connections. So before the break, we had a special guest, Christine Burke from Clues Unlimited, and her website got cut off, so I wanted to repeat that again. It's cluesunlimited.com, and you can also find a link to her website at our website, which is whystoriesmatter.com, and we'd love to have you swing by and drop a note that says hi. So we are going to move on to adult mysteries that Kathryn and I have read, or may not have read, as the case may be. Every week I do a reading list, and this week my son has not been sleeping, so I didn't get to everything because I have been sleep deprived. So.
But I read a lot of them.
But Kathryn did. So the first book that we're going to talk about is The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert... I just forgot his last name, and it's not up on my screen.
Well, it really doesn't matter because it's really by J.K. Rowling.
Right. It was written by J.K. Rowling.
Which is the thing that I think is interesting about this book, right? Because the Harry Potter books are this phenomenon. And...
I forgot to turn off my phone.
Yep. So anyways, I will continue where she's going. So the book was written... So J.K. Rowling wrote an adult novel... that I forgot the name of the title, that didn't do very well. It wasn't very well written. It was actually kind of really boring after the Harry Potter books. And it sold because it was a J.K. Rowling book, but then people started reviewing it and going, yeah, no. So she wrote another book called The Cuckoo's Calling under a pseudonym. And
I don't know if her thought was, well, maybe I'm a great writer and I can, make a fortune as somebody else.
I'm not sure.
But it's an okay book. I wasn't sorry that I read it. But it's not a fantastic book, right?
No.
And
it desperately needed an editor because it was 500 pages long.
It did. And so the way that I read this book was I read about the first 150 pages, and then I skipped to the end to see what happened and whether or not I wanted to finish reading the book.
Right, which I think is a very interesting, how I wonder, and actually if you want to call in and tell us if you did that, the number 790-2040, how many people read mystery novels like that? Because I will admit that mystery novels that don't catch my attention, I figure out who the main characters are, and then I skip to the end and figure out what happened, and then I decide if I want to go read back and watch the...
Right.
I've never done that.
Well,
I've never done that with a mystery novel.
Okay.
Well, I guess you have a great deal of character.
No, actually, that's going a bit far. No, if it doesn't strike me in the first 100 pages, it goes away. I don't even bother to find out what happened.
Oh, see, I couldn't leave it hanging like that. If I read a book that I'm like, okay, particularly mystery novels, I'm like, okay, I need to know who died so I have closure, or I know who died, but who killed them so I have closure, and then I will put the book away.
Yeah, but if the book is garbage, why bother?
Because you want to know.
Right.
Yeah. But if it's garbage, why bother? That's a waste of time.
Well, I guess it's, different how different people read, because I would never be able to leave.
Because it takes 5 minutes to find in the end where it tells you what happened.
And see, that's 5 minutes that you could be looking for another book.
That's true.
There is some truth to that.
Except that I don't have a problem with looking for another book because I have stacks of books that people have said, you should read this. Anyway, so I wasn't sorry that I read it, and I did go back and finish it, right? But I wanted to know, okay,
who do I not care about, and who do I need to care about?
Exactly. And it was too long.
It was too long.
But I felt like the writing, just like I thought that the writing changed throughout the Harry Potter books, I thought the earlier Harry Potter books were much better than the later Harry Potter books.
I agree.
I feel like the writing in this book was much closer to the later Harry Potter books than the early Harry Potter books, which I guess makes sense because if her evolution as an author has been to devolve, of course they're not going to be.
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily been that her evolution as an author has been to devolve as much as she was making her publisher an absurd amount of money, and people would read the books whether, it was 300 pages or I think the last one checked in at like 700 and some pages. It didn't matter because the readers were still going to read it. But I think that it's really interesting that as Robert Galbraith, which I looked up, it wasn't selling very well. And then I've heard different stories about how her name got out there as, she actually wrote this. And once everybody knew that it was a J.K. Rowling novel, everyone picked it up. And, Amazon's got 6,883 reviews and 4 stars. Well, I don't think that it's 4-star worthy, but a lot of people clearly did because...
Right, I think I would have given it 3 stars.
Yeah, I would have given it 3 stars, but that's an average, so...
Yeah, it's an average book. But, So that was one of the books that was on our reading list for this week. Then there was The Mysterious Affair at Styles.
And yes, the first Agatha Christie book, which I have to admit I did read, and I'd never actually read an Agatha Christie book before. Everybody's like, you have to read Agatha Christie, you have to read Agatha Christie, and I'm like, she's old, and the books are old, and why? And I picked it up, and I loved it, and she's an author that I will start actually reading.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, what does old have to do with anything?
I felt like the books were going to be really dated. Like they weren't going to be relevant. And I don't mean relevant in a snotty, literary, cultural kind. It's not relevant. But okay, so I had a hard time reading Sherlock Holmes because the language, even though I am an English lit major, I had to actually work to read that book because I had to actually translate in my head what they were talking about. And I was concerned that Agatha Christie was going to do the same thing.
Okay, so what you're really saying is because you are a young mom with a toddler, your reading time is limited. Yes. And so you weren't sure that you wanted to spend it reading a classic.
Yes.
Because you were not positive that the classic was going to be sufficiently satisfying.
Yes.
Okay. And?
I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
My grandparents have a big thing for Poirot. There's a TV show that's based on that. And I had seen a couple episodes because I visit my grandparents on a regular basis, and this show has been on for forever because I remember watching some of it when I was little, and I never really got it because I think it's a little more sophisticated than 8-year-old me could understand.
Right.
Which is part of why I was very hesitant to read it, because I remembered the TV series, and I was like, it was boring, and they had British accents.
Okay.
Because it was done by the BBC, which is part of why I was hesitant. But I really, really, really enjoyed it. So if you have not read Agatha Christie, and you are a mother of a toddler who's not sleeping, this is a good book to read because it's actually enjoyable.
Entertaining. Okay. So you want to give a really quick plot summary?
Okay, so a really quick plot summary. There's a murder. They're trying to figure out who did it. The person that they thought did it has an alibi that's really very solid, and so they end up convicting the son.
No, they didn't convict.
Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry. They ended up trying. So the woman who died, stepson, is at trial, and Perot is the detective. He's a Belgian detective who's working to try to figure out what happened, and he's really very funny. The writing is very clever, and you could sort of see him prancing around as he's doing all of this. And he really was prancing. They talk about how he's short and Belgian and prancing. And so at the end of the book, there's a twist that I have to admit I did not see coming. And I don't know if I didn't see coming because I was sleep deprived when I was reading it, or if I didn't see the twist coming because it's actually a good twist. But either way, I did not see it coming. And I was really pleasantly surprised. And I closed the book feeling like I'm really glad that I put this on the list of books to read. And the reason I picked it was because I felt like you couldn't talk about mysteries without talking about Agatha Christie. I felt like it's like talking about mysteries without talking about Sherlock Holmes, which we will also talk about.
Okay, so that's a good segue into talking about Sherlock Holmes. The thing about the Sherlock Holmes books is that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did not follow the conventions that we have started to expect from mystery writers. So you don't necessarily get clues going along that let the reader be able to figure out who did what.
Right. Well, one of the things everybody knows who Sherlock Holmes is, and he's sort of having a moment right now between the BBC and there's a TV show called Elementary on CBS right now that has a modern-day Sherlock Holmes, and Watson is Jane Watson, so she's a girl. But I got the Sherlock Holmes book off. I read it off of the Gutenberg Project because it doesn't have a copyright anymore, so you can go to the Gutenberg Project and .org, and you can get all of these not copyrighted books. And in the middle of the Sherlock Holmes book, it switches to this backstory in Utah in the middle of...
You should probably give the title of the book.
Oh, I should probably give the title of the book. That would be a good idea. Hold on, I'm pulling it up. Anyways, so they switched to the... Well, I'm looking up the title of the Sherlock Holmes book that we read. They switched to... Arthur Conan Doyle switched to the middle of nowhere, Utah. And I actually honestly thought that there had been a mistake in the book. That it wasn't part two. This wasn't part two. Like I was actually I was so discombobulated that I went and got a physical copy of the book to make sure that this was not a mistake, because I went to the library and I checked it out because I thought something went wrong. And that was really it threw me. It really did. So I have to admit that I hadn't read Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, before this go-around. You can't really live in modern America and not know who Sherlock Holmes is. But, and I'd seen the movies, which does not count at all. And I could understand why it was that people have such a love for Sherlock Holmes. I could understand why it was that people latch on to him, because he's very eccentric. But it wasn't something that I cared for. And the Sherlock Holmes book that we read was A Study in Scarlet, which is the first Sherlock Holmes book.
Right, and one of the only full-length novels, because a lot of the Sherlock Holmes work was actually short stories.
Right.
Okay, so what happens in this book is that there's a murder. Somebody writes on the wall in blood. They're trying to figure out who it is. There's confusion, and then all of a sudden Sherlock Holmes has the answer.
Right.
And you're like, how do you know that? And that's what I was talking about when I said he violates the conventions that we expect now, because now you expect an author to give you something that would let you understand who it was. So we don't have any idea how he knew. He just, sort of miraculously knew. And then it switches to Utah, and we get the backstory as to motivation. But the thing that I think is important about Sherlock Holmes is that it established the genre of mystery.
Right, and we will continue talking about that on the other side. You are listening to Story Connections. Don't go away.
Miss a show? Hear the podcast through our website, kvoi.com. Intelligent weekend talk that's live and local. Only on AM 1030 KVOI, The Voice. Call in now, 790-2040. That's 790-2040.
Hi, welcome back to Story Connections. So we are talking about mysteries right now, and the next thing that we're going to talk about mysteries is series. So you have a main character that is the thing that holds through all of the books.
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting about mystery as a genre is that often it is a series. Like, the author will come up with a character and then take that character through lots of different adventures. And I don't know where that started. I don't have any idea where that started, but I know that for me, my expectation that mystery would come in series was from Nancy Drew and the Bobbsey twins and Trixie Belden
and the Hardy
Boys, although I didn't read a lot of Hardy Boys. But, that you would have a protagonist that you became fond of, and then you just read about all of their adventures. And so as an adult, when I read a mystery that I like, I start looking for the other mysteries in that series, and I want there to be a series.
Right. Well, I also think that mystery is a good way to do introductory literacy for kids, because with like the Bobbsey twins or Nancy Drew or the Boxcar Children or Hardy Boys, it's easy, repetitive reading. So what you learn how to do is to read basically the same words over and over and over and over again, which gets them into your brain so that you don't have to.
Right. Well, it's called rapid automatic naming. So when you see those words again and again and again, there's a slot in your brain, and they just fall into that slot. So you don't have to sound out n, d, and every time. You've seen and a gazillion times, and so you can get there.
Right, but you also feel comfortable.
Right.
Because you know those characters. And with mysteries, like we were talking about earlier in the earlier segments, there's always a satisfactory conclusion. You don't ever feel like you've been completely betrayed. You always know that Nancy Drew or the Boxcar Children or the Hardy Boys, no matter what situation they're put in, are going to be okay at the end of the book. And that's safe for kids to learn how to read in.
Right. But in addition to it's safe, it's exciting.
Right.
So there's that juxtaposition between, oh no, she's locked in a closet, nobody knows where she is.
Right.
But I know it's going to be okay in the end, so it's safe for me to keep reading.
Right.
And I think that the excitement gets kids to want to read. The resolution makes them feel satisfied once they've read. And the more they read those books, the more skilled they become as readers, the easier it is to read them, the faster they can read them. And there's a certain satisfaction in, I can read a book in an hour.
Right.
You know?
I absolutely agree.
So when my brother and I were little, we used to have reading competitions, and he would start a Hardy Boys book with the same number of pages as my Nancy Drew book, and we would see who could read fastest.
How did you make sure somebody didn't cheat?
We didn't.
Okay. Just curious.
Scout's
honor.
Right. It just never occurred to either of us, I think.
Okay. I was just curious. Along that lines, a series with a character that you pick that you like, these are older series, but they are probably my first introduction to adult mystery novels. And that is the Cat Who series by Lillian Jackson Braun and Mrs. Polifax series by Dorothy Gilman.
And you didn't actually read those, did you?
No. Those were actually audiobooks that we used to listen to on trips back and forth to California, because we used to drive to California a lot. And so we would go back when they were cassette tapes. And you could go to a store as opposed to, one of the online stores. You actually went to a store like a bookstore to get these tapes, and you could rent them. That was how we listened to them.
Right.
But we actually, for the Cat Who books, the Cat Who series has Quill is the main detective,
Private Eye
human character. But the two secondary characters who are...
Well, he's not really a private eye.
No.
He's just a guy who does
he's the amateur sleuth.
Yeah.
But he has two cohorts, Coco and Yum Yum, who are cats. But Coco's real name is Kalkokum. And he's a Siamese cat, and he's incredibly wise, and he gives Quill all of these mystic cat clues to help Quill figure out the mysteries. And we actually, after listening to a couple of the books on a trip, came home, and we had two kittens that one was a girl and one was a boy, Coco and Yum Yum. And Coco, who's the boy, was one of the best cats that we've ever had. He played fetch. We had foam blocks, and if you threw the foam blocks, Coco would chase them, pick them up, carry it back to you with teeth marks in them, drop it on the floor, and I'd never
to play fetch.
Right. And he was very, very smart, and I don't know if the name had anything to do with it, but we liked to pretend that it did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a post hoc error there.
Probably. But Lillian Jackson Braun wrote like 20...
I don't know how many there are in the series.
There are a lot of books in this series, and they're fun. I mean, they're easy books to read, and you always know that Quill's going to be okay, and you enjoy the adventures of Coco and Yum Yum and them being in this small little town, and it does everything that you want a mystery novel series to do.
Yes. And along those same lines of it does what you want a mystery series to do is the Mrs. Pollifax series by Dorothy Gilman.
Yeah, and Mrs. Pollifax is a widow. She's reached a certain age. Her children are all out of the house, and she decides that she always wanted to be a spy when she was little. So she packs herself up from New Brunswick, New Jersey, takes the train down to the CIA headquarters, walks in and wants to get an interview with the CIA, and through a series of misunderstandings ends up in front of a handler who thinks that Mrs. Pollifax is somebody completely different, gets an assignment and goes off to, the first one, she goes off to Albania. And
actually, she goes to Mexico City. And she gets kidnapped from Mexico City.
Oh, that's right.
And ends up in Albania.
Right, and that's the first Mrs. Pollifax novel. And it's, her as a completely untrained spy, because they don't really figure out that they've made a mistake until it's pretty much too late to do anything about it. And she does a series of that, and she's clever and exciting. And for those of you who may not know, there's an organization called the Red Hat Society, and it's for women over the age of 50, based off of a poem that when I grow old, I will wear red hats and purple outfits because they don't go together, and I will be eccentric. And it was, sort of this, for me at least, getting old isn't going to be scary, because when you get old, you can wear weird clothes and become a spy and be in books. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but as a 10-year-old, that seemed really cool.
Okay.
So I have warm, fuzzy feelings about Mrs. Pollifax, because it was sort of you can be anything that you want to be when you grow up, even if you've done a whole bunch of things and you decide you want to do something different.
I think that's really what it is. And I think that's a big appeal of Mrs. Pollifax, is that you can spend your whole life doing one thing, in this case being a housewife in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and then you can get into your mid-60s and say, I'm going to do something else.
Right.
And although it's not really realistic that people are going to become spies in their mid-60s, the point really was the world is open to you.
Right, and I think that you can see that people like to see that in, I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, but she was the woman that went on Britain's Got Talent, and she sang...
Susan
Boyle. So, she was this frumpy, middle-aged woman who nobody expected anything out of, and she was on Britain's Got Talent, and everybody was sort of mocking her. Simon was being, Simon, and she opened her mouth, and by the end of the song, everybody was in tears. And now she picked a very appropriate song because,
right,
I can't remember the song title off the top of my head, but it's from Les Mis. And it talks about, wasted dreams from your youth. But she did it so well. And
Isn't that I Dreamed a Dream?
Yes, I Dreamed a Dream. Thank you. But it's that same, part of what Story Connections is about is that we want to pull for the unexpected. That we like stories that surprise us. We like stories that have happy endings in a way that you wouldn't expect. And both with Susan Boyle and Mrs. Halifax, you have this very unexpected juxtaposition of women who seem to be past their prime, who don't really have very much left to give or live for in their life, who end up being able to do extraordinary things. And I think that's cool.
It is cool. So, in terms of series, then...
Oh, and the first Mrs. Halifax book is called The Unexpected Mrs. Halifax by Dorothy Gilman.
Right. And there's a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
But in terms of series, I think that there are many, many series. And actually, thinking about it, there are a lot of cozies that do just that, where there's an ordinary person who gets put into a situation that they would never in a million years expect to be put into. At least in the first of these series, right? I mean, nobody in a cozy sets out to be a murder detective, right? But they're put in a situation where something happens and they need to respond. And they respond in a way that's extraordinary. And I think as a reader, it's appealing because you like to think, if I were put in that situation, I would rise to the occasion. And it lets you live vicariously and rise to the occasion.
Well, and you also see that in, memoirs about heroic things. So, 9/11 and people who ran into the building as everybody else was running out, or people who helped people out of the building, or, there's just, I can think of all kinds of stories like that we as humans love to hear about people who are in extraordinary situations that rise to the occasion. Right. We don't want to read books about people who are put into extraordinary situations and didn't. We're not interested because... Well, that may be me. We want to believe that we will be the people that are, able to hold it together.
Right. We're the people who will take down the plane. Right. And, that's one of the extraordinary things about human beings is that they do rise to the occasion.
Frequently, we saw that here in Tucson with the Gabby Gifford shooting. This horrible, crazy, evil man did a horrible, crazy, evil thing. And normal human beings who were going about their everyday lives stood up and said, we will not let you do this. We will stop you. And that's why we read. We read because we want to plan what it is that we will do if we're ever in that situation. Not that we want to ever be in that situation, but we want to think about it. And that's part of what mysteries let us do. So this is Story Connections, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Intelligent Talk 24/7 on 1030 KVOI. The Voice. On the web at kvoi.com. Intelligent local and national hosts. 1030 KVOI. Tucson's intelligent voice.
Hi, welcome back to Story Connections. So we have been talking about mysteries this show, and on our website, whystoriesmatter.com, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com, whystoriesmatter, you can get all of the links to the books that we've talked about and the books that Christine, or the authors that Christine Burke recommended earlier in the show.
And Christine Burke is the owner of Clues Unlimited,
yes.
And she was visiting with us.
Yes. So now it's time for our book recommendations of the week, and we'd like to thank our sponsors, David Guthrie with Coldwell Banker. Mr. Guthrie has been in the real estate business for over a decade and is one of the top 5 real estate realtors in the state of Arizona for Coldwell Banker. He understands the fluctuations of the real estate market and how to make sure that your buying or selling experience is a good one. You can get in contact with Mr. Guthrie at 520-406-4702. Again, that's 520-406-4702. And their other sponsor is Susanna Townsend. Susanna Townsend is an on-location natural light photographer who has a love of capturing life's important moments. She does weddings, senior portraits, family shoots, and much more, you can contact her at SusannaLynnPhotography.com. That's SusannaHLYNN Photography.com. And you can also find both Miss Townsend and Mr. Guthrie's contact info at Why Stories Matter. Also, quick plug, we are looking for sponsors and advertisers for the show. So if you like the show and you want to support the show, please contact me at Rebecca at WhyStoriesMatter.com, and we would love to work with you. So, Kathryn, do you want to do your book recommendation?
I do. So the book that I'm going to recommend is Murder on a Girls' Night Out by Anne George, which is the first of 8 books by Anne George. Anne George actually passed away in 2001, so this is an older series, but it is so funny. And Anne George is a fantastic writer. She actually was also a poet. She was a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet. And while her books are not poetic necessarily, the fact that she is a poet, I think, is reflected in her use of language, because the way that she puts words together to paint a picture is fantastic. You have a vivid sense of where things are happening. You have a vivid sense of what the people are like. There isn't a character that she introduces that you don't have some kind of emotional connection with. Even the ones that are just temporary, even the ones that are, not even secondary, tertiary, have something that makes them feel three-dimensional. And there are not very many mystery writers who do that. Often when characters come in, they are not, they're there because they have a job to do, and they aren't anything other than just, there to do their job. She actually gives them flesh.
So it's the Shakespeare quote, there are no small actors, just small parts?
I think it's the other way around.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
There are no small parts,
just small actors.
Yes, exactly. And, I think that's hard to do in mystery because most mysteries really are plot-driven. The reason you're reading it is because something happened and you want to find out why it happened and who did it. And that, by its very nature, makes a mystery a plot-driven piece of work. And so when characterization is strong, the mystery itself becomes a better mystery. So I feel like the whole Anne George series, the canon of Anne George, I guess, is worth reading. And I was really, really sad when she passed away. And usually when an author passes away, I feel like, well, that's unfortunate, because I feel like whenever anybody passes away, that's unfortunate. When Anne George passed away, I felt like a whole cast of people that I knew had died. I wanted to find out what happened to the sisters in the mystery. I wanted to find out what happened to their kids. I wanted to know what happened to their grandkids.
So there was no closure.
There was no closure. It was very difficult. So Murder on a Girls' Night Out is your introduction to the Southern sisters, who are Mouse and Sister. And those are their nicknames from when they are little girls. And Mouse has been married to the same man for a long time, and she's got kids, and she used to be a teacher, and she is just, like your housewife, right? And then there's Sister. And Sister is larger than life. She's an enormous woman, physically enormous. She's got a huge personality, and she's been married and married and married and married. And she makes a habit of marrying men who are older than she is, who are rich, and then they die. So she's really, really wealthy because she's been widowed so many times by these men who had a lot of money. And so she decides that she's going to buy a country western bar because she likes country western music, and she likes line dancing, and, she's got money to burn, so she's going to buy a country western bar. And she and Mouse, Aunt, Sister, and Mouse, go to the country western bar so that Mouse can see the country western bar, and there's a body.
Okay.
And so they get sucked in because Aunt Sister can't possibly leave things alone, and Mouse sort of gets sucked along behind her. And it's fantastically funny as they're interacting and they solve this mystery.
Okay. So that was
it's Murder on a Girls' Night Out by Ann George.
Okay. So my book of the week recommendation is a book called We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, and it was released on Tuesday. And I picked it up because I listened to podcasts about books as part of getting ready for this show, and a whole bunch of people were recommending it that had seen early copies of the book. They were saying, this is a book to watch. This is a book that's going to be, you have to read it. It's really, really good. So I picked it up with a lot of anticipation because E. Lockhart, we spoke about 2 weeks ago when we did YA. She wrote The Disreputable History of Frankie Landau Banks, and I like her work. I've read several of her books, and I like her work. So I was like, okay, I like her as an author, and a lot of people that I trust their recommendations are saying read it. I can't say too much about the book itself without completely ruining the book, so I'm not going to, because you need to read it with as fresh eyes as you possibly can. But it's about a girl whose family is old, wealth, East Coast Democrat rich. Like, they own an island off of Martha's Vineyard. And every summer, all the grandparents, the 3 sisters, and all of their kids go to this island and spend basically May through August on the island. And the 15th summer that her 15th summer on the island, some tragic accident happens, and that's how the book starts, is that this accident has happened. And she goes back the 17th summer to try to figure out what happened. And her figuring out what happened was probably one of the best books I have read in a very long time. It was so good that at the end of the book, I had to sit in my living room and just process what it was that I had read, because it was so good. And it doesn't sound like much with the description that I gave, but if I give any more, it's going to start ruining it for you. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. I can't say enough good things about this book. So again, it's We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, and there's a link on our website to that. And along those lines, I have started writing once a week book reviews for a website called ArizonaViewpoint.com, and so if you want to get book reviews by me about things, sometimes there'll be books that we talk about on the show, but frequently they will not. You can go check those out as well. So that's pretty much our show for this week. This is not book related at all, but it's something that I think that is a Tucson treasure that everybody should know about, so I'm going to use my platform to talk about it. There is a thing called the Tucson Pops that happens in the spring and in the fall in Tucson at Reed Park at the amphitheater that's across the way from the Rose Gardens. And it is 5 Sundays starting in May through June and 5 Sundays starting in September through October. That are free concerts to the public. You can go, bring a blanket, take a picnic, bring your children, and it's free, and it's good, fun music that you can get up and enjoy. And it's been something that we've done for a very long time, and it's a thing that not very many people know about. So I wanted to say, hey, go do this.
I don't know that it's true that not very many people know.
I always run into people who've never heard of the Tucson Pops that don't know that you can go listen to free orchestra music. So this is Story Connections. You've been listening to Rebecca Guthrie and Kathryn Townsend talk about mysteries, and we will see you next week at 4 o'clock. Have a great week.